Domantas Sabonis reportedly was growing frustrated in San Antonio even before his injury. The Timberwolves are on search for a point guard and end up missing out on Ja Morant, who they could pivot to next. And the Bucks are doing their due diligence on a possible Zach LaVine trade. We're talking about all that and more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. I'm the host, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And we're going to start off with this one. Sources apparently told Hoops Hype that Sabonis has grown dissatisfied with the Kings' decline. He's also frustrated with how his role shifted under Doug Christie's system. His usage fluctuated, his touches came late in possessions, and the offense that once flowed through him has stalled far too often. For a three-time rebounding champion and two-time All-NBA star, the lack of structure felt like a step backwards. He ended the league's longest playoff drought, yet the Kings still lacked clarity. Instead, Sabonis felt like the rhythm of his game slipping away. Now, we've talked a lot about the Kings and the potential of them blowing up their roster and what that could look like for a long time. And in talking about that, I have talked about the fact that Sabonis went from averaging almost 9 assists per game down to 3. And that does go to the structure of the offense and system and things like that. So hearing that Sabonis is frustrated with his role and with the place of the Sacramento Kings should not shock anybody. Unfortunately, the Kings made trades for Zach LaVine, who the Bulls had years of difficulty trying to move him, right? You also got, DeMar DeRozan in an offseason where you're trying to add something to that team to help get over that playoff hump. And as DeMar DeRozan as an isolation scorer, but then you fired your coach, which alienated De'Aaron Fox, and that's led you to where you are right now. I've talked a lot over the last couple of months on this podcast about why the Kings should be terrified of potentially losing a player like Domantas Sabonis and him requesting a trade out of there. Now, it seems like that may be just a foregone conclusion that it could come sooner rather than later, and we'll see there. Now, with Sabonis, being reevaluated in 3 or 4 weeks in his injury, it already has the Kings now searching for what's next for that team, and that's just something that we don't. The tension is there. There's no doubt about it. There's tension all over that roster, and fans feel it, teammates feel it, and now the Kings have to answer the thing of a difficult reality of where their team is right now. And so with Sabonis out, not only does Christie have to now reshape the offense and the anchor of the offense, which is a team that, you see how you feel about when it comes to that. They're 5-15 on the season. They're 2-2 in their last 4 games with wins over Denver and Minnesota. So, take that for what you will after a long losing streak. But there's no real solution, just one solution that fixes what's going on for the Kings. Hearing that Sabonis is frustrated but has not requested a trade yet could lead to the fact that maybe this thing is still salvageable, depending on how you want to look at that. It's no guarantee in that, but maybe it is salvageable, right? Now, the fact that Sabonis has already, carried the Kings and helped them become relevant once, we'll see what happens with that one if he still has the capability or interest in doing that for the Sacramento Kings franchise. But they have an upward hill to climb, several of them when it comes down to it. And we don't know exactly how this is all going to work out or shape out or anything like that. And you have these pieces now on your roster that, you're open to trading your veterans, but who's going to want those veterans is a big question here. And that's what the Kings really have to try to find an answer to first on what a return could look like for any of those guys. And then if you can find moves for DeMar and Zach first, right? And then maybe hopefully you're getting pieces back that fit more naturally around Domantas Sabonis. Maybe you can avoid Sabonis wanting out completely. But then Doug Christie, it still leaves the questions on the offense and Doug Christie's operating of the offense and how it's kind of taking the ball out of Sabonis' hands at times as well. These are all questions that they're going to have to try to figure out. And, it's difficult to figure out a lot of this stuff during the season. It's just difficult to do that. Not saying it's impossible. We've seen teams make midseason trades that completely change how that team was viewed. So it's not impossible, right? But when you go from, you look at over the last couple of years, Sabonis 8.2 assists 2 seasons ago, 6 last season, down to 3.7 this year. There's just tons of questions on how much can you really salvage with this Kings as it is. I personally still hold the mindset that, the Kings probably with where they are, their best bet is to probably blow it all up, keep their young players that they have that people have interest in, and then try to see what you can be in 2 or 3 years. But, you have a player like Sabonis there who's 29 years old. That shrinks your timeline if you're still trying to fit it around when Sabonis can still, before Sabonis, starts maybe hitting a decline. But we'll see. Crazy things have happened in the NBA. But one of those players that the Kings could be looking to move is Zach LaVine. And reportedly, the Milwaukee Bucks are doing their due diligence on Zach LaVine. They, the Bucks had a long losing streak there. And, because of that, of course, teams start looking at different things they could do. The Bucks started off this season red hot, right? Looking like a team that was definitely going to be able to compete in the Eastern Conference. They now fall into 9-2 in the season. They did win their last game against Brooklyn, but before that, they lost 7 straight games, did the Milwaukee Bucks. So naturally, you're looking at some things and some things that you can do differently. And so hearing that the Bucks could be interested in Zach LaVine, I'm really of two minds about. Because you look at what Zach LaVine is as an off-ball shooter. Zach LaVine is actually one of the best catch-and-shoot players in the NBA per percentage. He's been that for a while. In Chicago for a little while, Billy Donovan didn't really use him to that catch-and-shoot and strength that he had there. And that's what it comes down to. Now, with Giannis also sidelined, you don't know exactly what's going to go on there, right? But ultimately, now the Bucks potentially could be looking at a trade for Zach LaVine. This comes from Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype as well. He says this: the Milwaukee Bucks have conducted background due diligence on LaVine and others around the league, as usual, sources told Hoops Hype. However, nothing is imminent, and the Bucks superstar Giannis nears a return from a low-grade abductor strain. Should Milwaukee interest in LaVine become serious, it's worth noting the Bucks forward Kyle Kuzma and Kings governor Randavine, I believe is how you pronounce it, both invested in a new women's professional sports venture called Major League Volleyball, and Kuzma has been linked to the Kings via trade rumors for several seasons. So looking at trying to piece together a Zach LaVine trade for Kyle Kuzma, and that comes down to how you view Kuzma, right? I think that's the thing that how you have to view that, because if you do not view Kyle Kuzma as a seamless fit, he's averaging 13 points per game, on decent efficiency, I guess, from Kyle Kuzma, over 50% from the field, which is really good there, right? But, Kyle Kuzma plays a completely different position than Zach LaVine. But if they look at Kyle Kuzma and they're like, hey, we made this trade for you, it didn't work out, we can get a piece in Zach LaVine, who we are familiar with. We played against him 4 times a year while he was in the Central Division with the Chicago Bulls. Maybe that could make some sense there. Now, the question is that would the Kings be interested in Kyle Kuzma? You look at it. Kyle Kuzma does have only 1 year left on his deal after this season. His contract is much less at $22 million and then $20 million next year. So it is a declining contract, which could save you something there. But then you still got to match the almost $40 million of Zach LaVine's contract. So it wouldn't be a Kyle Kuzma for Zach LaVine straight up swap. And then you got to ask yourself, okay, what are the other pieces coming? Is there long-term money back for the Kings? Would they be interested in that? Zach LaVine does have a player option for next year at $48 million. So Kyle Kuzma's contract gets you about a little bit less than half the way of matching Zach LaVine's contract, but you still got a lot of money that you would have to include in that. And I doubt they want to give up Bobby Portis in that. They definitely, you're not going to trade Miles Turner. So what is that move then going to look like? And that's the question that the Bucks would have to ask themselves if the interest in Zach LaVine is legitimate, right? Now, reportedly, the Bucks have also kept interest out on Anthony Simons, who could make a little bit more sense at being a younger player there, right? And that's also according to Scotto as well. But that the Celtics could still be looking to get below the luxury tax, which could help them at that point as well. But what's obvious here is that the Milwaukee Bucks are looking to still improve their roster. And that makes sense. We all know that with Giannis and the potential of Giannis ever asking for a trade, it's going to make some sense for them to always be looking in a spot to continually improve that roster. That's the pressure that Giannis has put on that fan base. And we'll see. I mean, if they want to secure a future with Giannis, you gotta keep adding talent. And if you can flip a talent like Kuzma for either Anthony Simons or Zach LaVine, and again, the formula for Giannis has always been surround him with shooters, get a center in there, and usually you're able to make some things happen. So we'll see what happens to that one. But let me know what you guys think down below. Would Zach LaVine be a good fit for Giannis and on that Milwaukee Bucks team, or is Anthony Simons viewed as the better fit? Let me know what you guys think on that down below. With that said, next topic. The Timberwolves are also reportedly looking for a point guard leading into the trade deadline as well. And reportedly that the Timberwolves are looking for aggressive moves when it comes down to that one. And they've actually tried to make a swing for Ja Morant, which didn't. Reportedly, the Ja Morant effort did stall. This again, according to Hoops Hype, but they remain committed to strengthening their roster before the trade deadline, with point guard considerations still high on the agenda. Direct quote there. And so it seems like they're interested in building, and we know that they need a point guard. And reportedly, Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels are both considered virtually untouchable. No shit, especially Anthony Edwards. He should be untouchable in anything when it comes down to that. But they also view McDaniels now as a critical piece to that roster that they aren't willing to move off of. He's averaging career highs almost across the board, career high in shooting percentage as well, and he's shooting the ball really well overall. So if you can get a point guard into that, that would make a lot of sense, right? Julius Randle also having a great year, really picking off on what he did last year. But you have Dante DiVincenzo basically starting, at playing a lot of point guard for them as well, and maybe that could be what they look to move off on. So we'll see here. The the Minnesota Timberwolves needing a point guard, it makes sense. We knew that kind of coming into this year. They can get a really good point guard. I think that's clear. Their agenda is clear. They want to add a point guard without jeopardizing their young core, and that's smart. So while the Ja Morant trade did not materialize or work out, seems like Connelly in Minnesota still remain very active on finding ways to add a point guard to that team. And so their moves are being very closely watched to see what they can do, and we'll see if Minnesota Timberwolves can. Let me know what you guys think down below. If the Minnesota Timberwolves were adding a point guard, who's some of the point guards that you think you would target around the league if you were the Minnesota Timberwolves? And is that going to be enough to help them maybe finally get out of that hump of the Western Conference playoffs and get our finals and get actually into the NBA finals? Let me know what you guys think on that down below. With that last part said, man, we got some bad news for the Thunder that seem like they cannot get injury-free completely. With Jalen Williams coming back, you now have Isaiah Hartenstein is going to be out 10 to 14 days with a calf strain. This is the most recent calf strain in the NBA. We're seeing that NBA teams are taking this very seriously because now there's a much better understanding on how calf strains relate and then affect eventually Achilles injuries. And that's why you're seeing a lot of this, them completely shutting players down. A few years ago, you probably would have seen players try to play through some of those calf strains, but now you're seeing teams just shut them down because they do not want to risk, what happened to other players around the league like Tyrese Halliburton and Jason Tatum and other players, to where a calf injury turns into Achilles thing and then you're losing your whole season. So for this, it sucks, right, for that. But you got Chet Holmgren playing at a great level. You got Jalen Williams coming back. You're going to have the other Jalen Williams and Kenrick Williams as well. Try to add some front court depth to that. But the Thunder are going to have to, the Thunder are a team that have dealt with injuries very well, and they're going to continue to deal with injuries very well. This would have been where, maybe, hopefully if Thomas Sorber didn't get hurt, he could have stepped in here, even as a rookie, and tried to provide them a little bit of that depth. But this is the Thunder we're talking about. They're going to figure out a way because they always figure out a way, and we'll see where that leads them at the end of the season. But that's my thoughts. That's my time for today, guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. But Sabonis' frustration, what does that mean? I want to hear from you guys on that one. With Minnesota gearing up to be aggressive at the trade deadline, who could they target as well? And then Milwaukee looking into Zach LaVine and Anthony Simons. What could that look like for those teams? But make sure you guys are following us at NBA Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and or voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything basketball related, but that is thanks to you guys. And make sure you guys stay locked in, stay hoop ready, and I'll catch you guys the next time I feel like making a video. Probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.